Our behavior replication project was on an interdependent group contingency and phone usage. So just a brief overview of what the study or what we were going to be discussing in our presentation. First, Montana will be discussing the original study, and then Colleen will go over how the original study differs from our study, as well as the purpose and the methods of our study. And then Caitlin will discuss the results. Karma will go into further detail on the graphs produced from the data from each participant. I will go over the conclusions we drew based off of our results. And then finally, Abigail will share the limitations we faced during the study.
Okay, so our original study for the research question of the study, it was, does the implementation of group contingencies decrease cell phone usage among 6 high school students? So basically, the purpose of this study was to determine the effects of a group contingency on cell phone usage. The teacher in the classroom had noticed that their classroom had very high cell phone usage, and she wanted to try to control this behavior and decrease this behavior. Studies cited in our article stated that 64% of students reported cell phone usage during class, which disrupts learning and instruction. For our method section of the original study, we had 6 high school students, which 3 were male and 3 were female students. They were all in a photography class on Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday. The teacher used a 90-minute partial interval recording to record whether cell phone usage was occurring or not. For this, they used a group contingency. So if cell phone usage occurred during the 90-minute class period, and the students did not earn 10 minutes of free cell phone use at the end of the class for the intervention phase. The study used AB reversal design that included a baseline phase, an intervention phase, a return to baseline phase, and then lastly, a second intervention phase. Before the baseline phases, the students were not reminded of the group contingency, but they were reminded before each intervention phase. The operational definition of cell phone usage during the original study was if the students touched, swiped the screen to activate it, looked at or continued to look at or manipulate the screen, or if they used both hands to manipulate the screen. So this would be like texting. A non-example would be if the students just tapped the screen one time to check the time. So what is a group contingency and why is it important? A group contingency is basically if any member of a group engages in an undesired behavior, then no member of the group earns that reinforcer. Group contingencies are designed to increase or decrease group behaviors because everyone in the group is impacted by the behavior of one person. The study implemented a group contingency that if any student used their phone during the 90 minutes, then no student would earn the 10 minutes of free cell phone use. This also helped keep the peers accountable of each other and would likely decrease cell phone use behavior. For IOA for the original study, it was conducted by a graduate student who sat in the classroom. IOA was collected on 21% of sessions, and the study had an IOA score of 100%, which showcased internal validity of the study. Treatment fidelity was collected 23% of times and with a score of 100%. For the treatment fidelity checklist of the original study, it was maintained by informing students on each intervention day that they were working towards earning 10 minutes of cell phone usage for the group contingency. The other item on the checklist was either giving or withholding the reinforcement whether the contingency was met. This was a really important aspect of the study because either withholding or giving the reinforcement for the group contingency really was a motivating factor for the students. And this treatment fidelity was something that we wanted to carry through with our study. For the results of this study, it confirmed similar group contingency study results from other articles. The intervention implementation of a group contingency did decrease cell phone usage in the original study. Veronica in the original study showcased a decrease in cell phone usage during both intervention phases, and so did the rest of the group during the group data results. The average percentage of students who use their cell phone in baseline phase was 88% compared to 16.5% in the first intervention phase. During the return to baseline phase, 100% of the students use their cell phones compared to 16.5% of students in the second intervention phase. The high levels of behavior in the baseline phases compared to the low levels of behavior in the intervention phases showcases a clear relationship between the independent and dependent variable in this study, which did confirm that group contingencies affected cell phone use. Now Colleen is going to explain how our study differed from the original study.
So the purpose of our replication of the study was to evaluate if the use of that same interdependent group contingency could reduce the cell phone usage during study time for us 6 graduate school students. So it was similar to the same purpose for the original study. The methods that we used, we had 6 female students. All of the participants are graduate students at Ball State enrolled in this course, ranging in age from 22 to 38 years. It was a difficult setup in the beginning, trying to figure out when we would all be conducting our study sessions, but we eventually decided that it would be most beneficial and least difficult to conduct our study sessions in our own study area on varying days and times of the week when it worked for us. We also realized that a 90-minute study session of uninterrupted time is very unlikely. So we dropped our time for our study sessions to 30-minute periods. What we did use was a phone app. It was called the Realize D app, and our cell phones. Only things we needed, we considered using paper and pen, and we considered doing all the intervals and stuff like that, but we eventually decided to go another way. Like Montana mentioned, this was the definition for phone usage. So activating the screen by touching or swiping it, looking at or continuing to manipulate the screen, or using 2 hands to manipulate the phone. But a non-example, like Montana mentioned, would be just touching the screen to activate the time. Our data collection was different from in the original study. We took, like I said, our just duration data for 30 minutes. We did not do partial interval recording. We all just took duration data. And we used this app as our way to also include IOA data in it. And we would start the app and then set our phone down, get to studying. And then when our 30-minute session was over, pick up our phone, open the app, and take a screenshot of how much time we were on the phone. We also used an ABAB design. We decided that 5 was the minimum number of data points we wanted to have for a condition. So we looked for stability in our baseline after 5 sessions. And then we gave ourselves 6 intervention sessions. With that stability, we went back to our baseline condition. And then again, after stability with that, we went back to our intervention procedure again. For our intervention, our baseline, we collected our realized duration app on our normal cell phone usage during the 30-minute study times for 2 weeks. A lot of us realized it was somewhat embarrassingly high. Clearly, we were not getting much studying done in that 30 minutes, not great. But we collected data for at least 5 sessions of those 30-minute study periods. And the days and times did vary for each student. You know, we all couldn't sit down at the same time and do it. So that was our baseline condition. Our intervention condition then was our interdependent group contingency. The reinforcer that we settled on was 2 hours of Netflix TV kind of like time if everyone in our group, all 6 of our participants, met the criteria of not using our cell phones during those 3 weekly 30-minute study times in the intervention condition. At the beginning of those intervention study sessions, Each one of us had our own method of having a phone prompt, having something prompt us to remind us that we had a tangible reinforcer coming later if we didn't use our phone during this study time. For me, I set a reminder or an alarm. I kind of used both to see which was more effective, just for my own pleasure. They both worked. And to let me know, like, if I thought I was probably going to be able to study at 6 or 6:30, I set an alarm for that. And it reminded me to both turn on my Realized app, but also, like, this weekend is Netflix weekend, so get ready. For our inter-observer agreement, we used that app and we took screenshots. We took screenshots of at least 30% of our sessions, both baseline and intervention conditions. We each also had a reliability buddy, and we were assigned to another person in our group. We would take those screenshots and send the screenshot to our accountability partner. And we would also send them pictures of our graph along with our data, so they could see that what was on our screenshot was actually what we're inputting in our graph. The total count IOA was calculated. So we compared the two numbers using smaller number by the larger number multiplied by 100. And our IOA ended up being 100%. Treatment fidelity, we had a really simple self-checklist. We had a 3-step thing where we would set a reminder in the beginning. And then if we all met our group contingency, we got our reinforcer. If someone did not meet the contingency, then reinforcement was withheld. And we calculated that treatment fidelity on 30% of the sessions and got 100% fidelity. So now Caitlin is going to describe a little bit of the results and our app.
Yeah, so we used a screenshot of our data during the intervention phase for one of the participants using the Realized D app. So here you can see this screenshot during that intervention phase. So you can see that this was at 0 minutes. So we're not looking at the pickup interval, or like the longest, I guess, duration between. So those would be non-examples. So the results of the replication are demonstrated in the graphs that follow along with the data average and range for each participant. So just also briefly going to mention that we did screenshot during our baseline phase as well. That is not pictured here, but during our baseline phase, this did range in duration. I think high points being in the 20 minutes duration. So obviously we wanted to see that start decreasing. And then in our intervention phases, we were pretty much all at 0 minutes throughout those phases. So then now Karma is going to go over our graphs more.
Sorry, I was muted. All right, guys. So we have Abby's graph here. As you can see, her baseline mean was 4.57. Baseline range was 3 to 7. And the intervention mean was 0.14 minute. So as you can see here, she had a 1 minute duration for the study time during the intervention phase. So according to our group contingency that week, we did not meet the group contingency. Therefore, we did not receive our reinforcement. And going back to the baseline phase, you see there is an immediate change in the behavior. So therefore, the return to baseline mean was 9.14, and which differed highly from the intervention mean. And when the group contingency was reintroduced, the behavior went down to a 0 and continued going down to a 0 till the end of the intervention. For the next graph, you see the same thing. This, let's see, this is the graph 3. So you see the, okay. All right, so we have graph 2. Baseline mean 13, intervention mean 0, back to baseline mean is again around 10, and return to intervention mean is 0. Range for both the intervention phases are 0. So here you can see there is some variability in the data. When you come to intervention phase, you see there's a stable trend, no variability at all. So this also shows how the intervention was very effective. The same goes for graph 3. Baseline mean is around 6 and return to baseline mean is around 5. So very close, and intervention means are both 0 and the ranges for the intervention are 0 as well. For figure number 4, we see baseline mean of 16, return to baseline mean of 3. Treatment mean for both the treatment are 0. And you can see a direct functional relationship, just like in other graphs, with the independent and dependent variable. Same goes for this graph, Samantha's figure number 5. So you see the baseline mean is 13, return to baseline means 15. So very close again, both the baseline ranges and means. And for the intervention phases, you see the same thing. We have a 0 mean and 0 range. And for this last one, you can see the baseline mean is around 4.6. Return to baseline mean is 5.6. So this one is very close as well. You see the same thing for intervention, 0 for the mean and 0 for the range. So this again shows a direct functional relationship between the dependent variable and independent variable. So now Abigail, I think, or conclusion. So Samantha is gonna go over the conclusion part.
Okay, so we had 2 conclusions at the end of our study. The first is that the interdependent group contingency was effective for all 6 of us. The results supported the original study that the interdependent group contingency is effective in reducing cell phone usage time in students. And then the second conclusion was that there was an immediate change of high magnitude in both the intervention phases for all 6 participants, which demonstrates a clear functional relationship between the cell phone usage and the interdependent group contingency. And then next, Abigail is going to go over some of the limitations we faced during the study.
All right, so some of our limitations are on this slide. I'm just going to go over them really briefly. The first being that taking data with our app led to some difficulty. For example, during my intervention, I often forgot to close out the app after my study timer had gone off. So this led the app to continue tracking my activity even after my intervention was over for the day. So this led to some skewed data. Some numbers were a little bit higher than they might have actually been. And there wasn't really a clear stop or start button for tracking. So it just started when the app was open, and remembering to open and close the app on time was really important for our intervention. So overall, just technical difficulties with the app would be a limitation. Also, unlike the original study, we were unable to have our study sessions all at the same time due to conflicting schedules in life and school and whatnot. So that made the group contingency part a little bit more difficult to adhere to because we weren't receiving reinforcement right at the end of our study session like the original study was, but rather at the end of the week. So that might have been a limitation for our study. Also, it is unknown if the students used another form of technology, such as our personal laptops or even our watches, to gain access to similar content that you would find on your phone. For me, I know that I forgot to silence my notifications on my laptop and my phone, and I was definitely tempted to respond to messages on those devices during my study time. So just monitoring anything outside of phone use would be a limitation. Another one would be our use of reinforcement. So it was kind of difficult to find one that was equal for all of us and equally reinforcing. For example, we use Netflix time, but I personally find my phone more reinforcing than Netflix. So I might not have been as motivated to conform to the group continue during those days. And unlike the original study, we didn't really have anyone monitoring our reinforcement and giving it to us. So that was also a limitation, just kind of controlling our reinforcement. The original study focused on the student with the most screen time, which we chose not to do. And the last limitation, or just a drawback really to our study, was the feeling of anxiety that participants might have felt due to the restricted phone use during intervention. And then just overall, as mentioned in the conclusion, our group contingency was effective for all 6 participants, despite all of these limitations. And that's all we have. There's our references, and yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone. We hope you enjoy our presentation.